Hi everyone, this is me, Oscar, and now I'm going to present my country at a glance, which is the turn for Namibia. Here you have the contents of the report, which I decided to divide into 6 categories. The first one will be general facts, which is just basically general knowledge for you to know to better understand the background and for later having a better knowledge of the historical contextualization, economic factors, social, political, and cultural relevant aspects. The second point, we will be tackling the historical contextualization, which I decided to divide into 3 categories, which are the colonial period, South Africa occupation, and its independence, finally. The third point, I'm going to tackle the economic factors, which I decided to divide into 2, which are the macro and the microeconomic indicators. The fourth point is the political facts and international challenges, in which I will present the political index, but also the political structure and the political performance of the country per se. And the fifth point, we're going to tackle the social factors, which I will present also the social index and the social performance of the country over the past decades. And last but not least, the cultural and relevant aspects, in which I will present the main Namibian ethnicities. So let's jump into the general facts. Location. Namibia, as you can see here on this map, is located in the southwest part of the African continent and is surrounded by Angola on the north, by Zambia on the northeast, by Botswana on the east, by South Africa on the south, and by the Atlantic Ocean on the west. The surface of the country is 824,292 kilometers square, and its capital is called Windhoek. The currency. The currency of the country is the Namibian dollar, the NAD, and the South African rand, the ZAR. The second one is due to the fact that Namibia and South Africa share a really deep trade relationship, and thus the South African rand is widely accepted across the country. The population. Namibia has a population of 2,550,916, and its official language it's English, although German and other native spoken languages are widely spoken across the country. Then let's jump on the brief historical context. The historical context. In 1488, the Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias visited the country. Bartolomeu Dias stopped in Walvis Bay and Lüderitz on his way around the Cape of Good Hope. Between 1886 and 1890, there was a present international boundaries established by German treaties with Portugal and Britain. Germany annexed the territory of Southwest Africa. History tells that Germans claimed Southwest Africa as it was known between 1884 and 1950. In 1950, South Africa, being member of the British Commonwealth at the time, occupied the German colony of Southwest Africa. However, before that, in 1892, between 1892 and 1905, there was a huge social rebellion, and there was a suppression of uprising against German colonial occupation by the Herero and Nama peoples. It is calculated that possibly around 60,000 people, or 80% of the Herero population, were killed, leaving 15,000 starving refugees in an act that independent Namibia has as an act of genocide. Namibia has passed through several distinct stages over the years. At a first glance, the history of Namibia is relatively recent. However, this is partly due to the fact that the pre-colonial history was never written down, but there is plenty of archaeological evidences that shows that people inhabited Namibia at least 25,000 years ago. Namibia is a diverse country of hunter-gatherers, traditional pastoralists, subsistence and commercial farmers, trade, miners, and fishermen belonging to a variety of languages, and cultural groups. Then we jump into the second part of its history, of its recent history, which is the South African occupation that goes from 1915 to 1990. In 1915, South Africa takes over the territory during First World War. This was due to the fact that the League of Nations, it was a League of Nations administrated territory because Germany was pretty damaged after the First World War. Thus, as South Africa was part of the British Commonwealth, South Africa took part in administrating the territory. Namibia owes much of its most recent history to the famous scramble for Africa that resulted in 1878 British annexation of the land surrounding Walvis Bay Harbor, the Afrikaner track borders escaping to the Cape Colony to the south, and the proclamation in 1884 by Bismarck of the Protectorate of German Southwest Africa. And as I just mentioned, during the First World War, the South African forces gained control of German Southwest Africa, and following the Treaty of Versailles, continued to administer the areas of Southwest Africa. In 1958, Herman Toivo Yatoivo and others created the opposition Overlord's People Congress, which becomes the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, in 1960. In 1961, UN General Assembly demands Southwest Africa terminate the mandate and sets Southwest Africa's independence as an objective. In 1966, SWAPO launched an armed struggle against South African occupation. So we can see from 1966 till 1990, there was a social class between the part of the society that wanted to become independent, which was a great majority, against the South African occupation. In 1968, Southwest Africa officially renamed Namibia by the UN General Assembly. Thus, till 1968, Namibia was called Southwest Africa, and in 1968 it became known as Namibia. There is a country, the name is country that we know nowadays. In 1988, South Africa agrees to Namibia's independence in exchange for removal of Cuban troops from Angola. In the resolution 435 of the United Nations in 1899 finally resulted in a peaceful independence for the Namibia people in 1990. Thus, we jump now into Namibia's independence in 1990. That more specifically was on March when Namibia becomes independent with Sam Nujoma as first president. In 1994, South Africa, exclave of Walvis Bay, turned over Namibia. In 1999, on August, and there was an emergency declared in Caprivi Strip following a series of attacks by separatists. In 2002, in August, new Prime Minister Theo Ben-Gurirat says land reform is a priority, and President Nujoma says white farmers must embrace the reform program. This was to the fact that, as we're going to see later in these social factors, the South African occupation of the territory left a heritage also of the apartheid. There was a really strong difference of treatment between Black and white population. Being the Black, discriminated and excluded for many social, political, and economic aspects. Let's talk now about the economic factors. After experiencing an average annual growth of 4.4% between 1991 and 2015, Namibia's economy stagnated in 2016 and fell into recession in the following year. The economy has since struggled to recover. Leading up to the mid-2010s, investment in mineral extraction, which is one of the main economic resources of the country, a booming exports, and a government spending underpinned growth. Namibia subsequently suffered from failing commodity prices with growth in key trade partners, which are Angola and South Africa, and a tight fiscal policy on the back of the government's effort to rebalance public finances. Moreover, there is an important fact to mention, that is the COVID-19 pandemic that has, as in the rest of the world, has affected drastically Namibia's economy. And here, as you can see on the slides, the macroeconomic indicators, where on the left we see the origin of the GDP in percent, and we can see how agriculture and services have increased its percentage towards the GDP. However, industry has suffered a huge backlash, going from 5.8 to 4. And on the top, we can see how the economic indicators of GDP seem quite positive. However, this must be taken with caution, because COVID pandemic has said something dominant across all the globe and across all countries, which is uncertainty, and we don't know how this uncertainty is going to impact Namibia's economy in a macro level. If another wave is going to materialize, lockdowns or restrictions that can damage directly and indirectly Namibia's economy. Regarding the microeconomic indicators, we can see how the unemployment rate has decreased a bit. This is a positive aspect. The population is also increasing. However, the unemployment is also increasing. We see an increment of 2,000 people. And the most important thing, which is the youth unemployment rate, which has increased from 43.4 to 46.1, and this must be tackled as soon as possible. The inflation rate is at 4.5, which is 2 points over the average that the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the UN agreed to set at 2.5. And this is going to increase due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, which has shocked directly the supply chain of daily products, food, and other resources such as oil and gas. And on the right, we can see how the regional ranking, Namibia's performance sets them in the 11th position, below Tanzania and one place up of Madagascar. Then let's talk about the political facts and international challenges. Politics of Namibia take place in a framework of semi-presidential representative democratic republic, whereby the president of Namibia is both head of state and head of government, and a pluriform multi-party system. Here on the right side, you can see the picture of a man whose name is Hage Geingob, which is the current head of state and head of government of Namibia. The executive powers is exercised by both the president and the government. Legislative power is vested into 2 chambers of parliament, and the judiciary is independent of the executive and the legislature. Additional to the government political structure, Namibia has a network of traditional leaderships with currently 51 recognized traditional authorities and their leaders. These authorities cover the entire Namibia territory. Traditional leaders are entrusted with the allocation of communal land and the formulation of the traditional groups' customary laws. And sometimes they also take over minor judicial work. While Namibia is a multi-party democracy, the ruling Southwest Africa People's Organizations, SWAPO, has ruled since independence. Protections for civil liberties are generally robust. Minority ethnic groups accuse the government of favoring the majority of Ambo in allocating services. The nomadics and people suffer from poverty and marginalization. And other human rights concerns include police brutality, criminalization of same-sex sexual relations, and discrimination against women. Here, according to the Freedom House Index, Namibia is considered a free democracy with a score of 77 out of 100, where the political rights have a score of 31 out of 40, and in civil liberties, and a score of 46 out of 60. And here on the right side, we can see the democracy ratings of the Freedom House has scored Namibia with a 2 out of 7, where the lower scores are more democratic. Thus, the lower the number, the more democratic the country is. That's why it has a freedom status of a free democracy. As we just mentioned, this is a schedule of the political system, the system of government, semi-presidential. The presidential electoral system is a two-round system. Last presidential elections were held in 2019. The presidential term limits are 2, and each term is composed of a 5-year term. And also the last legislative elections were also held in 2019 too. Here you have an indicator rank of Namibia, which it is actually considered the 76th best country regarding political aspects in the world, with a GDP per capita in US dollars of 4.957, and the income level is an upper middle income. And here in the indicator ranks, I found it really interesting. That's why I replaced this table, because we can see how Namibia's performance in different political aspects and economic aspects compared to the global average. So we can see where Namibia is performing outstanding and where Namibia should improve in order to catch up with the global average score. Then we have the social factors. By many economic and social indicators, including population per physician, per hospital bed, and per telephone, Namibia is statistically better off than many other sub-Saharan African countries. However, such comparisons also mask the huge disparities between rural and urban Namibia and between its Black and white populations, as we mentioned, due to the heritage of the apartheid of South Africa. One of the social and economic challenges facing Namibia is finding ways to share prosperity equally among groups across the country. Some of the problems that they are facing are such as high unemployment, low growth, high debt levels, and weak revenues, and persistent poverty that social protection was designed to mitigate. Namibia also would benefit from a better information system. Namibia also faces a human resources crisis in the public health sector. This is characterized by a shortage of healthcare professionals. There are high vacancy rates of all categories of staff, high attrition rates, mostly due to resignation, lack of human resources retention strategy, and staff burnout. In addition, there are inadequate capacities at local health and social academic institutions to produce required numbers of needed health workers. There are 3 health workers per 1,000 population in Namibia, which is above the World Health Organization's recommendation of 2.5 health worker per 1,000 population. Namibia has a critical shortage of social workers split into various government institutions, NGOs, and faith-based organizations, as well as a few private practices. Most recently, President Hetchingo developed the Harabe Prosperity Plan, which focused on reducing poverty and wealth redistribution. Here on the slide, we can see on the left side that the social factors data, which Namibia has an index of 42.5% out of 100, which is below the average and the medium. Thus, Namibia, even though that Namibia has a really solid political and economic spheres, and even more taking into account that it's a really young nation state, the social sphere must be improved. Life expectancy is 64 years, which is quite good, but could be improved also. And the median age is 22, which follows the trend of the African countries across the continent. with one the characteristic of having a really young population. Mean years of schooling are 7, which also must be improved. Spend on education in percent of the GDP is just 3.1, which also must be drastically improved. Population in work is 47.5. That must be also, it is a problem that must be tackled. And population living in poverty is 13.4. And on the right side, we can see how Namibia's social safety net divided into informal and formal, being formal the one that is publicly funded. And last but not least, the cultural relevant aspects. From the Bantu-speaking Ovambo and Herero tribes to the Damara minorities and nomadic San Bushmen, Namibia boasts cultural and historical flavors in spades. German colonization left its own imprint on this Southern African nation, with German being a widely spoken language today and German architecture and cuisine featuring prominently. With just 2 persons per square kilometer and a population of 2.5 million, Namibia's different cultures span an impressively diverse population for what is a sparsely populated country. Then let's talk about the main Namibian ethnicities. First, the oldest one, the San people. The San, direct descendants of Stone Age inhabitants, have a legacy spanning many centuries across large parts of Southern and Eastern Africa. Rock art dating back thousands of years in some cases stand testament to the very enduring power of the San people. Not only is their presence of immense historical importance to Namibia's ancient cultural heritage, but to its present heritage too. Namibia's Khoisan population is the largest in Africa and largely concentrated around the northern the Kalahari. Then we have the Nama, which are highly recognized by these colorful dresses. Despite being pastoralists, the Nama tribe's fascinating history by no means sees them being put out of pasture. Lauded as fearsome fighters in pre-colonial times, they routinely fought wars with the neighboring Herero over fertile grazing grounds dotted across parts of central Namibia. Some of these skirmishes dragged on for a large part of the 19th century. With their fist trade in mind, it's unsurprising that the Nama rose not once but twice in armed rebellion against German colonial rule. A dark stain on the country's history marks the Nama's second uprising, which resulted in a mass genocide executed by German forces and a devastating loss of land for the pastoralists in the early 20th century. Then we have the Damara. The Damara and Nama people share the same language, but little else. Their origins are clouded in mystery, although some believe that the Damara are descendants from Western African hunter-gatherers. Nonetheless, their modern-day history has seen them not only as pastoralists, but as agriculturists and skilled coppersmiths too. The first Prime Minister of Namibia and his immediate successor were both Damara, for example. And last but not least, we have the Herero. The Herero are arguably the most culturally recognizable in Namibia, with its women known for their bright and colorful ankle-length dresses, high necklines, tight bodices, and long puffed sleeves. Adapted from the European fashion in the Victorian period, the style of the dress is now regarded as a cultural tradition and worn with a cloth headdress pointed on their side, meant to symbolize cattle horns. Like the Maasai in East Africa, the Herero are historically nomadic herders, with cattle forming an important part of their culture. The Herero also rose in rebellion against the colonialists in 1904. In modern times, Herero activists like Chief Hosea Kutako, after whom the international airport in Windhoek is named, figure prominently in the quest of Namibia's independence. And as you can see here on the slide, the so famous dress of the Herero women. And also, I wanted to mention the German influence because, as we have just said before in the introduction, it is surprising the strong German influence across the country. Historical architecture in Luderitz and Swakopmund is reminiscent of a German town in the 19th century, while the older sections of many towns across the country feature buildings with domes, towers, turrets, oriel windows, embellished levels, and ornate bay windows. Namibia's capital, Windhoek, is home to numerous German restaurants with a beer named after the town brewed in the string compliance with the Leitensenbock, the Germany purity law of 1516. And here you have my bibliography, all my sources in order, if you want to check and look for further information about Namibia, which I recommend you to do, because I found that it's a really interesting country with so many things to know and to be understood and to keep learning about. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that you enjoyed this country at a glance presentation. Bye.